All right, we're back. We are GAME1014 in the summer 2017 semester at George Brown College, and we are week 3, part 2 of our broadcast. We're talking about assignment details, and that's including your presentation and all that stuff next week. Let's talk about today. Today I've put together this lab 3, which is up on Blackboard. What am I looking for today? So working with your team, you're going to update your external document. That's what you're going to do. That's producer. I want you to do that. Adjust your plan to reflect your current progress. So if you didn't produce, if you're behind, you need to make a plan adjustment for next week. What are you going to be doing this next week from today until next week, right? Okay, so that's what I want you to do. Talk about the functionality that is still left out. So if you have a bunch of stuff you still need to do, you got to list those things in your external document and kind of talk about those things and who's doing what. I want to know who's going to help you produce, who's going to help you finish. That means you have to work with your team to make sure that they agree that that's what they're going to work on. I also want you to produce some estimates for me, right? So think about how many hours is left. Is it doable? Can you get it all done? And if it's not doable, what are you going to leave out? Okay? So that's what I want you to talk about in your plan, in your this report this week. Include comments for last week's meeting, right? What went well? What didn't go so well? What will you do differently? That kind of stuff. I want you to think about that. And so that means you need another section inside of your game design document. We can call it week 3 progress. In fact, you can create a weekly report section. I fully endorse that. So that way in your weekly report section, you can it details. It's a working diary, if you will, of all the stuff you're doing. I know it's not exactly part of the game design document in real life, but for us, we're going to use a single document to document everything, okay? That way I can always look at it and go, well, here's what you said. And we're starting today because it's the first week of work, so this is week 3. Last week, you may have not had anything from the previous weeks, but this week for sure, I want to know what happened last week and what's going forward. Remember, I asked you for that. So how do you submit things? You need your updated game design document, a link to your current GitHub repo if it's changed somehow, or if you've changed from Create.js or Vanilla.js to Phaser or something like that. You may want to create another GitHub repo. I'm okay with that, but give me that new link, right? A list of active members this week. So if you just took Hercules in, then if he's going to help you produce that and you're going to give him a task, I want him to get some kind of role. If that's his, give him a role, something to do, and then assign something to them. So then that way he can be there. If someone didn't show up this week, or if someone wasn't productive last week because they chose not to be productive, note it. I know it's hard. And you're going to say, well, yeah, but then he's going to get mad at me, or she's going to get mad at me. When we talk about honesty, it's the best thing because later on it's going to come back to bite y'all, right? All right. I sounded like someone from the deep south there for a second. Okay. Presentation next week. There's 2 parts. There's the presentation piece, and there's your actual first playable. Like this is like the deliverable. These are worth 15% combined for your next week for your final grade, man. So if you don't do this, will be a good chunk off your final grade, right? That's why you need to break them. I don't know if there's a better way to say it this week. Get together, right, and do what you have to do to produce what you didn't produce last week. So that way you can get your first playable done. Let's talk about your presentation in detail now. So here's your presentation requirements, right? So again, working with your team, you'll present your game project. Your presentation should include details contained in your game design document. So draw from there, get things like your wireframes. If your wireframes was you drawing on a napkin and taking a picture, at this stage, you're better going to like a paint program and redrawing your wireframes a little bit so they're a little bit clearer, okay? Yes?
A program that someone had suggested to me is something called Tiled.
Yeah?
It's just made like units and you can like piece them together and it's basically a wireframe compiler. Like
I'm fine with that. Any kind of wireframe maker. I don't need a prototype. I don't want you, it doesn't have to be colored. In fact, I prefer that the wireframe is not colored, that it's like as raw as it can be because that gives you an idea of what your plan was, right? But that's what I want you to include in your presentation, okay? So draw from your game design document from that. Like don't just come up with it from scratch. Talk about your planning process and your progress. That's what I really want to talk about. Your presentation needs to be in some kind of slide deck, whether it's PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever you choose to use. Has to be organized in a slide deck. Notice that there are two parts of it: materials, presentation value. Right? Materials is your PowerPoint presentation. Presentation value is you and maybe one other person speaking. Right? I don't want too many people up here. I don't want too many chefs. I don't need the entire team with out of 6 people, 3 of them have hands in their pockets. Right? I don't want that. That's really ugly. Right? I want the 2 people that are up here that are going to talk, to speak. Right? The one person that's going to be controlling the presentation here at the podium with me. Right? They're going to be presenting. They're going to be controlling the presentation and maybe playing the game. Probably should be the same person. So if the person's not comfortable playing the game, whoever they are, don't put them here, because anyone can click the button. Right? Next. That's the thing that I want you to think about. So I want it to be broken out like this: title page with your team logo, screenshot of your game should be probably the one thing I want you to do. Even if your game is looking pretty ugly right now, it's okay, right? It's the current state of your game. An overview slide of what this game is about with probably your inspiration. So what inspired you to make this game? Where did you draw this game from? Did you make it from scratch? Did you take it from another existing game? Your idea, the mechanic or whatever, put that down. A planning slide that has your wireframes in it and maybe other things. An instruction slide, please do not put anything like, lots of walls of text. I do not want to see walls of text each of the slides of your PowerPoint deck or your Keynote deck. I don't want that. And also, please do not use Prezi. Okay, I don't want to see a Prezi presentation. That's not what I'm looking for. It's got to be a slide deck. Okay. So in your instruction slide, I want images everywhere. I want your PowerPoint document to be customized to your game. You're gonna what are you talking about, Tom? What are you really looking for? Trust me, it's coming, right? And also at the end, after you're gonna talk about your game progress. This might be one or more slides, right? Where you say, here's the progress of my functionality. Here's the progress of my artwork. Here's the progress of whatever else you want to talk about, right, for your game. And finalize with your demonstration. Demonstration should take a few minutes. The whole thing should take no longer than, let's say, 7 to 10 minutes, I would say. I know it says a little bit less up here, like 5 to 7 minutes, but I would accept up to 10 minutes. I don't want it to be that long because there's a bunch of teams here. There's 4 teams. That's 40 minutes, not including any kind of feedback, which you're going to get from me and from everybody else, right? Next week, when we do the presentation, I do not want you to be silent and falling asleep when other people are presenting or leaving the room. All right, I want you to be active. This is part of your participation mark here, right? I want you to be active and give feedback. One of the things I may ask you to do next week as a deliverable is give feedback for each of the teams, right? So I want you maybe to put together a little document next week and say, what do I think? How do I feel the presentation went? How do I think this stuff? I'm going to use that feedback and we're going to share that. I want to share that with the other teams next week, right? So after next week, week 5, they're going to get that feedback. You're all going to get feedback from everybody else telling you how they felt your presentation was. So you're going to get at least 3 sets of feedback, each of your teams, plus mine, okay? And it's important to do that because it's that feedback loop is going to help you improve, because part of this class is presentation skills, essential employability skills, right? So that's what your presentation is all about. It's worth 5% of your final grade. Remember, there's 2 parts to it: materials and presentation value. Presentation value means when you speak, I don't want you to read the slides. When you speak, I want you to speak so I can hear you at the back of the room. I want you to have eye contact, right? I don't want you to speak down, right? I don't want you to speak too low or yell. Okay, we don't want that kind of thing. I don't want you to dance around in front of us, right? That's not required. Right? And if you're nervous, because some of you aren't practiced doing this, probably most of you aren't practiced doing this, right? Use a cue card for the first time. All right, it's okay. I will accept that. I'd rather have you read from a cue card in your hand and be organized in what you're going to say for each slide than ad lib. I do not want you to ad lib. This is not that exercise. All right? This is you being prepared about what you're going to say. Yeah.
Does the whole group need to talk or just the people?
No. Just to reiterate, thank you for that. Only 2 people need to be up here. And only those 2 people have to talk, right? And then the person who's in charge of playing the game is going to probably lead us through the game where they actually go through the game and show everything, right? That person doesn't really need to talk much except for saying things like, okay, here's the first level, this is my player, here's how I'm playing, here's the obstacles, here's what my background looks like. In the beginning for next week, it's probably going to be very short. There's not a lot to show, right? Because it's your first playable, okay? But it's going to get better and better. So here's something to ask you guys. So if, Ethan and I, if we're presenting together, right, and am I somehow going to look at him and go ahead, present, right? Is that how we're going to do it? What do you think? What's the right way to do it? What do you think the right way to do it is if I'm going to share my presentation with Ethan? Because I'm sharing with him, right? It's not my presentation, it's our presentation. So how am I going to do it? How am I going to share with Ethan? What's the right thing to do? Any recommendations over on this side? Everyone's on this side today, right? So what do you think? Any ideas? Come on, guys.
I'm not sure what you mean.
All right, so Hercules. I'll ask you guys. Hercules, right? So I'm presenting with Ethan, right? How do I stop presenting and give over the presentation role to Ethan, right? How do I switch between me and him?
Yeah, there's some.
Wait. I want to hear Hercules. Yeah. You could, but what are you thinking? What's the other better way maybe to do it? Yeah. Practice. Yeah, that's what I was hoping for, right? You guys have all this mapped out. You want to fool me into thinking this is so easy that, Ethan and I have practiced so that we've already done this thing. When I finish saying my word, it's almost like my line in a movie. He's going to pick it up and go, right? That's the right thing to do. The other thing is the person who's controlling the deck over here, whoever's sitting here, let's say Emma's controlling the deck, right? Because she's going to be playing the game, let's just say, right? Emma's not going to go to the next slide before Ethan starts talking. That takes coordination. That means you got to try it. You got to practice. So producers, whoever you are, right, you got to map that into what you need to do next week, right? There's got to be some time set aside for practicing your presentation. All right? I recommend it, or else you're not going to get very high presentation marks. And that's worth 5% of your final grade, right? So that's something we have to look at. All right, let's take a look at some examples from last semester, right? Because I think it's always good to look at other people's work. Please, I want you to be kind, right? Remember, this is last semester. People aren't here to defend themselves, right? So it's not right if you guys go. I'm gonna look at the first one. So here's section C. If you know the names, please don't say who they are, right? Okay, so this is their first slide. I want you to tell me, do you like this as a first slide? And tell me if you like it.
Is this first playable or is
This is the final, but I want you. Doesn't matter whether it's final or first playable. I want you to look at this with me. Hopefully, it's not going to crap out. Sometimes it craps out. I want you to look at this with me. This now you're going to see. Unfortunately, the people who are watching this live or whatever are only going to see this big this little screen here. They're going to see a little screen because they're going to see my presentation view. But take a look at this thing for a second, and I apologize for the people in section C. I'm not trying to put, kind of go. But what do you think about this thing, right? There's some good things and bad things about this one. What's the good things about this one? All the group members are listed right away. What's another good thing? Let's talk about some good things. Jester Jives is the name of the game. Yeah. What else? How about a screenshot? There's a screenshot right in the game, right here, right? That's a good thing. Here's some bad things. Here's the logo. Huh? No, I don't think it is. But you know what? It's okay. I mean, this is what they built up. Everyone did what they knew how to do, right? And is it a great slide? I'm not sure. Let's take a look at some other ones. As a first slide, right? Again, for those people, I'm gonna just make sure that I didn't kill my connection. Sometimes it kills my connection when I do that, and I don't want that. Let's take a look at another one. So we're going to take a look at ESG. All right. So here's another one, and I want to try and make it so that you can see the slide deck a little bit more. I apologize for this. I'm just going to try and look at this for a second, even if you can't see the whole thing. What do you think? Is this a better opening slide or worse one? How can you judge this? Some of it's going to be subjective, yeah? But can we be objective about this? What are they missing here? Screenshot? Name of the game, right? Like, yeah, thank you, Team ESG, but I don't know what your game is called until like slide 2, right? And this is good. One thing I do like about this is that they mention all the team members. that they have the logo. It's really massive, right? It's too big maybe, right? But the other thing I don't like is the fact that it's just pure black. If you look on the left here, it's all pure black, the entire presentation. Not good, right? So that's one thing I don't like, right? All right, let's take a look at blue screen production. See what you think about this one. All right. All right. So blue screen productions. If I maximize this so you guys can see it, and on when you produce when I'm actually doing it, the people will see my presentation view. But if you take a look at this for a second, it looks like a game, right? Like a blue screen, right? Which is kind of neat. They kind of made it more diegetic, like almost like you're in the game, right? Already. Or the game crashed or something, but you know something's going on here, right? Blue screen, that's why it's called blue screen production. It's kind of neat, like blue screen of death, right? Their second slide is kind of cool, right? That's their code name, Pew Pew, right? Which is kind of cool that these guys did the best in the class. Now, don't get me wrong, there's things they could have improved, right? But take a look at this stuff. Here's who we are, and here's what we do. Could they have done this in one screen? Yep, they could have. I think that's one thing they could have done to cut the slides down, right? Well, they had 10 people, yeah? No, actually, I was worried about them with the number of people they had, right? And they had a very simple looking game. They only had a top-down kind of platformer / shooter, right? So I thought, like, how can 10 people do a web game that I could do on my own, right? Like, I mean, no disrespect. And people said that. And the reason for that is because web games are very simple. But that's not the exercise. The exercise is working with your team to produce to produce all this stuff. And it's a lot of stuff to produce. It looks easy, but the stuff I'm asking you to produce, paperwork and everything else, is hard to produce, especially in the quality that I'm looking for, right? All right, so you can see that this is cool. One more slide here. Here's a review of what the game is. Notice there's not a lot of words up until now. You got a couple screenshots as to what were their inspirations. They talked to this at length, right? And then they went right into how they use the controllers. Remember, this is an update for them, right? So this is their characters. These two things are their characters, right? And this was an update for me, the final update for their game, right? Here's part 2. They continue talking about it. What was good, what wasn't so good, and so on. And some things are good here and some things are not good. One thing that's not good for me is there's still quite a bit of text. I still think they could have put in more additional screenshots in here and images. They did talk about the difference between where they came from and where they ended up, right? So this is their original screen, and then they came to this point. This is kind of the screen they came to for their opening menu screen, right? Different features they added in at the end, right? They also added, again, another screen about what it looks like. This is what actually the game looks like. Their exit screen. That's what it looks like, right? And then that's the original one. This is the original one, and this is what they developed into, right? Where they had their screen. This is what their game looked like, right? The original game. This is where it went to. So they get kind of before and after shots, right? You can see that. I mean, again, there's some really good things about this. I'm going to go through things. They talked about technical problems and some challenges that didn't go really well, as well as some design. And now this stuff is the stuff that I don't want these two things. This is the stuff I talked to them about not having in. I don't want you to put this kind of stuff in here at all. I don't think, even though it's fun and we're doing a game, I want you to keep a little bit more professional. It's okay. I mean, they did it. I didn't take marks off for them or anything like that. I did like the way they did it, and they defended it nicely. But I prefer not to have this in. Okay, so things like trolls, the troll faces in your game, Batman slapping Robin, any of that kind of stuff. Picard talking like this and saying, "Yeah, what's wrong with you?" Any of those kind of memes, please keep them out. All right, they don't belong in this kind of thing, right? They talked about GitHub stats. They talked about if we had more time, what we would do. This is all their final presentation stuff. So I think you guys get the gist. So good things and bad things about this one. What do you think are the good things about this presentation? Anybody? Good things and bad things. Some good things. What do you think? Looks okay, right? Images are good.
It's about the image, especially like that they use. It seems like they use the background image of the game itself for these slides.
Right, which is what I asked you guys to do. I want you to make it your slide deck look like your game, right? Like it's almost like you're showing what the game looks like without me playing the game. There was a demo after this, but I knew what I was going to get. And the demo didn't have to be long, right? So I want you to think about it. Now, there's some bad things too. I think they still could have organized the slide deck a little differently. All right, let's take a look at some stuff I did like about Team ESG. One of the things they did a lot was they talked about their screens a lot. You can tell this is where I didn't really think that they had great character design. Like one thing I didn't agree with was their whole Android character as an enemy. I didn't enjoy that. I thought that was, I didn't want that. I felt it was more like a placeholder, and it didn't match with the background of the screen, right? This is kind of feedback I gave them as a design, right? They talked about their planning process and what their inspiration was, right? How to play. This could have been done totally differently. I didn't need all this text, right? This is a no. This is a bad, you know? So, and we talked about this. Like, this is their final presentation. They could just put this in right here, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say the bottom half is probably enough.
That's it. And then or you could have made it with more images or whatever, right? You didn't need this, right? Features. This didn't really tell me much. This is almost like their assets that they were using as opposed to features, right? Which is okay to have an assets screen, but this could have been organized a little bit better, right? What their plan was for the final release and what they developed as of beta, what did they do, right? Again, to me, you know what? Some of these screens, they have I would say the lowest grade of materials. Not that they didn't present well. I think they did well from a presentation perspective. When their presentation value was good, right? But their materials really pulled them down, right? This is their original alpha that they actually made. Then this is the tutorial as a beta, because I asked for a tutorialized kind of level. Then this is the tutorial as the final. So they kind of had this area here where they kind of talked exactly. You know, some of this didn't work for me. I'll be honest with you. But they showed progression, which is what I want to see for you guys. It doesn't have to be perfect. Remember, you're creating a prototype for the end, right? Here's your level 2 textures. They use a level 2, and then they use level 4 instead of level 3 because level 3 wasn't working as well, right? So that they had 3 levels, different kinds of things: forest, some kind of underground level, and then the ice level, and then finally they went to the boss fight, which I felt was completely out of place, right? The boss fight in this case, they had 2 boss fights. One of them was this Pong game that they played, where basically what happens here is that if you don't attack these Pong paddles, right, then the ball comes at you and kills you, right? Kind of a game within a game. Didn't really see that really matched the style of the whole game, but you know, I allowed it. And again, it was just game design stuff. Was it really designed well? I'm not sure that this meshed well. So there's a lot of aspects to this whole thing that didn't really work for me, right? So that's that one. Now this one you might think is, you know, it didn't start off well, but one of the things I really liked about this guy, and I'm going to put it into maximize view here for a second. Again, hopefully it won't kill me. Is when I go to the second screen. So what's the story recap? So, you know, there's a jail. I'm in jail. This is kind of cool, right? The jester is the enemy, right? He's the guy that's wandering around. I escaped from jail, right? And now what happens is the jester follows me around, and that's what my game's about. Jester Jives is a game where the jester, which is a killer clown, follows me around the screen in this world and try and kill me. And my role is to collect enough heads so I can get out of the dungeon. Now the game I didn't agree with. Again, it was a procedurally generated game, procedurally generated platformer. Not because I don't like the idea. It's too tough. It's really tough to produce something that's really high quality here, right? So that's where I had a problem with it. But they were able to pull it off at the end. They talked about the original plan for the game, which is this. This is what happened at their first playable. Wasn't exactly the plan, right? And then this is their final result. This is what it kind of looked like towards the end. So it kind of got closer to what they wanted, right? Again, the slides are simple. Again, there's a gradient. It's not perfect, but there are screenshots, less words, more images. I like this slide deck more than the others, right? For different reasons. There's still some deficiencies, but they're not as bad.
So it played kind of like Pac-Man in a sense?
Kind of, but there actually were these platforms. The actual character, if you notice him, is right there.
Yeah.
He jumps on the platforms, but and to get the head, you have to go in there and collect the head. But meanwhile, the Jester didn't really. This is where it was really weird. The Jester did not really adhere to the mechanics of the gravity. He would just go wherever he wanted, right? So that was kind of the weird mechanic of the game, and it kind of made the game look weird and act weird and stuff like that, which I told them was part of the challenges of making a procedurally generated game. It was hard. The AI, like they were going to use A-star pathfinding. I'm like, hold on, that's crazy, right? This is a better screen for mechanics and instructions. It talks about what you do. They talk to the screen a lot. They talked about how to interact with the game. Here's what I really liked about them. When they did their progress, they really broke their progress down into several different screens. So they did like engineering, assets, sound, and they kind of used the little fire symbol to kind of say what's the current status. Are they 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5? So they kind of gamified it, if you will, right? And in fact, the whole thing was kind of gamified. Their final, I don't like this part. It's funny, but it's not. Again, I want to stay away from this stuff. This isn't you, right? I want you to. This is okay, right? I even like this, right? But this stuff can go, right? And the reason for this is because, again, I want it to be all you, all your game. I don't want you to demonstrate somebody else's assets, right? Yep. One thing that I can say is that they produced really, really well, and I was happy about, was their demo included a bit of an animation, a movie that they made, right? Which is kind of like line art that kind of showed the story, almost the exact same way that they did in the PowerPoint to show, and with a little bit of music and everything. It took the guy who produced it, it took him about 25 hours to produce the movie, right? Now that was up above and beyond what I've ever asked for. I never asked for some kind of cutscene, or whatever, right, in this little game. But he really spent his time doing it. It actually added a lot of fun to the beginning of the game, right? So everyone had their thing. So what am I asking for in all this stuff? Right, going back to this, I showed you all this stuff not to waste your time and to bore the crap out of you, or to entertain you even, but to show you what materials look like, right? I want you to customize your slide deck. I don't want any templates being used. No PowerPoint templates, no templates you download from the web. Make your own, which means you need to figure out how to do that. So whether you're using PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever, I want your backgrounds to be reflective of the type of game you're making. Make sure that you can read the slides. If you're going to put text in the slides, make sure the contrast is good. Don't put black on blue, right? That's not going to work, or blue on black, right? I can't see that. It's usually like a light text with a dark background, or dark text with light background. Make sure that we can all see what you're presenting, right? The projector is really bad, right? I'm just telling you right now. So what you're seeing right now, you know what? It might dilute what your actual game looks like at the end. My recommendation is, before you do your PowerPoint presentation, you may want to come into this room over the next week somehow, sneak it up on here and check it and see what it looks like. Because it will look different up here than it actually does in here, like on your laptop. It'll be a totally different experience, right? So think about your team logo. I want that to be everywhere. Yeah, you have a question? There's no HDMI cable. I have a dongle from my laptop. I'm using a Mac, but I have a dongle, a connector that basically connects VGA, which is what they have up here. I'm sorry, right? And my machine, right? Now you can try and use the machine here. There is a Mac in front of us right here, right? That you can log into and use just like any one of these Macs. Be aware that you gotta have your stuff here. You gotta have your PowerPoint here, and you gotta have your files, so that way everything works right in front of you, right here. You should probably test it out. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. There's and what about if you use something like, your Google slide deck or whatever? There's lots of ways of doing it. You have to test it out. So either you get a laptop, right? Like one of you must have a laptop you can use, maybe. Bring it up here, connect to VGA. Has to have a VGA connector, right? If you don't, then you can use the machine in front of you, which means you have to get whatever software you need. You can't install really software, but there is a VM in here, right? I think that's the PC VM, which gives you more flexibility, right? So you got to test this stuff out. Don't be blindsided by coming up the last day on Friday and going, Tom, it worked at home, but I got no tools. Check it out, right?
You can install on the Windows side.
Can't install on the Windows side. Any other questions in terms of what I'm looking for now? Did I answer all your questions for your PowerPoint? This is what I'm looking for your PowerPoint. Remember, part of your mark is going to be your presentation value and how you're going to come up here, which means be prepared, right? What if, here's a question I had from first section. What if you want more than 2 people presenting? You can certainly do that. There's 7 or 8 slides. You can give everybody a few slides to do or whatever. That's fine. Just make sure you practice so you can kind of shift between one presenter and the other smoothly, right? I don't want any ad lib. If you're ad libbing, I will know, right? And everyone else will know too. And when you're answering questions, you know, try and answer them as positively as possible. When you're asking questions next week, be nice. Don't tell me, where did you come up with this shitty concept? Sorry, this crappy concept. I'm being recorded. This crappy concept, right? Where did you come up with that? I don't want you to ask that kind of question. I'm saying, you know, what inspired you might be the best question. I don't understand how your inspiration matches what you've developed here. Those kind of are tough questions, but they're better questions than I really hate your game. That's really a bad comment, right? Yeah. All right, so that's the presentation requirements for next week. Let's also talk about what's due today and next week in terms of deliverables. So that covers this piece. I know it took. I did a kind of a protracted look at this thing, but I want you guys to have no questions. I don't want you guys to have any questions in terms of what I'm looking for. All right. I've shown you some examples that were somewhat good in some parts. I know that if you spend some time together, you can make them look better than this. Okay, you can do that. You can make it look better. This is like your baseline. Okay. Assignment 1, your first playable. What am I looking for? You're going to create your first playable release. It has to be functional, right? Your first playable should include movement mechanics, obstacles, or enemies, or some kind of challenge. That there should be a threat to your player, right? Your avatar dying, right? Your artwork should reflect the style of the game, but only needs to be representative at this stage. In other words, you know, placeholders are okay, but should still match the game style, all right? Not required, but nice to have some sort of user interface that includes scoring feedback or player health or something, right? And not required, but nice to have some kind of sound feedback, yeah.
This is just level 1?
Level 1, yeah. I don't need, what's not required. I don't need you to have a menu screen or a game over screen at this stage, okay? If you have it in, it's not a negative. It's not required, but nice to have, right? The more you put into your game now in your first playable, the better it's going to be, okay? Submission details, a zip archive of your project files, okay? A zip archive of your project files. So I want all your project files in a zip archive, not RAR or any other kind of archive. Zip, okay? A link to your current GitHub repo at that time, whatever that link is going to be, right? And a link to your live site, which is nice to have but not required. All right. So if you make it live next week, fantastic, good for you, right? That's going to be ahead of schedule, right? Because it's not required by the first playable, but for the alpha release, it will be required that you are live. So anyone can play your game when you're presenting. Okay. So just FYI, that's coming. I did want to mention one more thing about story arc a little bit. And I kind of missed that with my presentation, but I will bring it here into our discussion before the end of my little discussion with you guys, right? I want to talk a little bit about the hero's journey. And it's hard to see this. And if you guys, have anyone done any work on story at all? Nobody?
English classes.
It's part of that. You might think you've never have to do English again, but actually there's some really good parts of this. I'm going to drag and drop this in here, right? Now you guys have it. It's inside of your Slack group. And this is really good to look at, I think. So one of the things for the hero's journey is an idea of thinking about how to build your level, right? You guys are still there, right? So the hero really starts in Act 1, and any kind of story, movie, whatever. And by the way, if you want to look at this hero's journey is based on Hero with 1,000 Faces from Joseph Campbell. He's a famous philosopher and writer about story, right? It really talks about the 3-act play or 3-act movie, 3-act show, where you have different parts of the story being broken out into different subcomponents. One of them is this whole introduction to the protagonist's world, the so-called normal world, or the ordinary world is another word for it, right? So the protagonist starts over here. He's in the ordinary world. He gets a call to action, or she gets a call to action. Hey, I want you to go on a journey. I need your help. Usually they say no. They say no. And there's some kind of threshold guardian that stops them. Hey, you know what? I don't think you should go. You have a lot of stuff. You have a lot of responsibility. Don't go to this thing, right? Or whatever. But however it happens, they have to cross the threshold, usually in terms of a journey that they have to take, right? They usually take a journey. And then they get to the first part of the special world over here. Think about this in terms of Luke Skywalker. Actually, he's using this example, right? He's in the ordinary world. Luke Skywalker starts off on Tatooine, right? He gets the call to adventure by Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? He says, no, I can't do it. I got to take care of my uncle and aunt's moisture evaporators, right? I got to stay home on Tatooine. I can't possibly be an adventurer. I can't do this thing. I'm not a Jedi. I don't know what you're talking about. And then they have no choice because, you know what? The Empire comes down and wipes out their aunt and uncle's farm. And now he's got nothing. He's got no choice but to go into the movie, right? And basically he progresses into the second act. And in the second act, right, some mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, teaches him what to do. He might have several tasks, and usually there's at least 3 tasks in here, a bunch of challenges, 3 levels, right? You can talk about 3 levels. One might be a tutorialized level in your case, right? And some kind of either temptation or some kind, doesn't have to be a temptation and dark moment. It could be somewhere where he's lost all hope, right? They've been captured in the Death Star. They're in the belly of the whale, call it what you want to call it, right? And in the Death Star, he's in the trash compactor. Help me out, R2, he's calling, right? He wants to get out of there. And then, they open it up and they escape from the Death Star, right? But they've met the villain. The villain has presented himself, Darth Vader, which is in Star Wars was the main villain, presented himself, but they escaped from him. So that they've kind of succeeded at getting out of the first challenge, right? And then they collect their friends, and in the third act, they have the final conflict, right? Where they battle and destroy the Death Star, right? And finally, Luke is the master of both worlds. He now understands the special world, the greater universe outside of Tatooine, right? And is also the master of his own world. Now, this is a Hollywood type story. Asian stories, right? In Asian theater and other parts of the world, for example, in India and other places like that, may not work like this linear storyline, right? Greece, for example, they do not work like this. And other parts of Europe does not follow this structure. But it's a great formula. I like to call it like this, because when we talk formulaic writing, when critics say, hey, it's very formulaic, your story, right? Because you can see the formula. Look, I just broke down Star Wars in 2 seconds, right? And by the way, if you go back and talk about Rogue One or any of the new Star Wars movies or any superhero movie with the origin story, that's in here. Origin story, call to action. You have to do something with your new superhero, Spider-Man, whatever you want. It's all the same kind of stuff. And Hollywood likes it the same way over and over again, because Hollywood's motto is, give it to me the same, only different, right? If you think about it. We produce the same movies over and over again. We produce the same video games over and over again. You guys are producing kind of the same video games because you're basing it off of a concept, some kind of inspiration, right? Why am I telling you all this stuff? Why am I telling you about story? This is not a story course.
Story is important to the game.
Story is definitely important to the game. If the story's cool and it's fun, it makes the game fun, especially if you follow it with your design. So designers, I'm looking at you now when it comes to this stuff, right? think about how you can incorporate the story into your game. Now you're at the early stages. You still got a week to fix up your functionality. And this is going to affect things like how your assets are going to look, how your sounds are going to respond when the player does stuff, right? It's all going to match up with your concept and your story, right? I don't need you to be super duper writers here, right, at this stage. But there's going to come a time where you're going to produce a story, right? Let's talk about Mass Effect. Whoever plays Mass Effect, right? Okay, you play Mass Effect. Does the story really end nice? Does it really? You spent all this time and like in 2 seconds it's over, right? Hate that about Mass Effect, right? That's one thing I don't like about it. I think Mass Effect is some good story in there, right? And there's some other video games too that I really like. I like Fallout a lot, right? I talk about that a lot. I like Bethesda games generally, except for Prey. I thought that was pretty lousy, but in general, when you look at games from the latest AAA studios that are out there that are still producing, that are still profitable, right? They have a story deeply embedded in the game, no matter how simple the game is, right? Because it influences things like the name of the game, whatever the game is. It influences the transition between levels. It influences how the game ends, how the game continues, how you have microtransactions in the game. Why would you have microtransactions in the game? To make more money? It doesn't matter. It influences every aspect of the game. So designers, I haven't asked you for this, but it's coming. When you think about your story, you're developing your story here as you're making this game with your engineer and your art person and everything else. But I'm going to be asking you more and more for what your game is about, right? Toward the end. Any questions around the stuff I talked about with your assignments? So lab 3 is due by the end of the day. I'm going to give you time to work on that right now, right? You get assignment 1, which is the actual game itself, and presentation 1, which are totally different. Deliverables for next week, right? Okay, I lied. One more thing I got to tell you before I stop, because you need to know how you need a tool. A lot of you said, thank you, Tom. We got some good direction, but I don't have a tool to do my project management. I'm a producer, and I need some help. What tool can help me? Well, GitHub has some really cool tools built in. So if I go to GitHub, this is kind of a different aspect. Sorry, it's not exactly about your assignment. But if I go to GitHub and I look at the thing we did last week, here's George Brown. Here's my lesson 2. What I can do is I can create something called issues. Right now, I've created an issue called enemy cloud should be randomly positioned at the top of the screen, right? Think about that as a task or a story point, right? My enemy cloud should be positioned at the top of the screen. Okay, cool. Now you might say that's like one minor piece, but if you describe every part of your first playable as an issue, right? You can also create things like labels. I created one called feature. So here's all my labels that come with GitHub: bug, duplicate, enhancement. I made feature. You can make another one, right? A new label, right? Like if I want to make another label and I want to call it something like, instead of an enhancement or a feature, I want something like a future feature. And so something I can't do right now, but I thought about, I want to maybe add in my first playable. I can choose the color, right? And then create my label. And then later on, what I can do is I can attach my label to an issue, right? So let's say my future feature for my little game that I'm making a new issue, right? It's going to be something like bullets. I want to, it would be nice to see the player's avatar fire bullets at the enemy. That's a future feature, right? And then that way my future feature, I can assign a label to it. So I can say future feature, right? I can also assign it to a milestone. I've already declared a milestone as first playable, right? And if you look at it, if I click submit, I have 2 new issues, so 2 issues now, right? If I look at issues, it would be nice to see the player's avatar fire bullets, as well as enemy cloud should be randomly positioned at the top of the screen. For milestones, you can just create a new milestone. I just call this first playable, and you can assign features to it, whatever the issues are. And it can tell you how complete you are. And this is a great way of tracking things right on GitHub for you guys. I recommend it. It's light, it's easy. yes, you can go and create a project if you want on GitHub too, and there's some really cool documentation on how to do that. I don't think it's required in this course, right? Any questions about the stuff we've talked about? We've talked about presentation in this video. We've talked about your assignments, your first playable next week, right? As well as some story stuff. And then we also talked about a small tool that can help you keep track of it. All right, so I'm going to let you do your thing. For the next hour, you have an hour left. I want you to use that time effectively. This is the time to get together with your team, plan out some stuff. This is almost like, think about this as a little meeting for yourselves. Make sure you get lab 3 done and submitted before the end of class. Okay, here we go.